You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Risk appetite is best understood as the strategic declaration of how much risk an organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its goals. No business can operate without risk. Expanding into a new market, adopting new technology, or even hiring staff all involve uncertainty. Appetite is set at the leadership or board level and reflects the organization's philosophy toward risk-taking. For example, a bank may adopt a low appetite for credit fraud, but a higher appetite for technology innovation. By clearly defining appetite, leaders provide a compass that guides decision-making, ensuring that security teams and business units align their choices with the organization's overall objectives. Risk tolerance narrows this concept into more specific ranges of acceptable variation. While appetite describes the broad willingness to take risk, tolerance establishes the acceptable wiggle room within categories or metrics. Think of appetite as a speed limit and tolerance as the margin that police might allow before issuing a ticket. For instance, if an organization has a risk appetite to accept moderate losses in customer service downtime, the tolerance may specify that outages under 2 hours per month are acceptable, but anything beyond that requires investigation. Tolerance provides flexibility without undermining the strategic direction set by appetite. Thresholds represent the operational triggers that translate appetite and tolerance into day-to-day action. They are numeric or categorical boundaries that, when crossed, require a defined response. For example, a threshold may be no more than 5% of critical systems with unpatched vulnerabilities. If this number rises above 5%, a playbook dictates that remediation teams must escalate immediately. Thresholds prevent ambiguity by making the rules explicit. They act like smoke detectors, quiet in normal conditions but loud and unavoidable when danger emerges. By defining thresholds clearly, organizations ensure that deviations do not go unnoticed or unaddressed. Alignment is a key principle in connecting appetite, tolerance, and thresholds. Appetite is set by executives or the board and reflects business strategy. That vision must then be translated into operational guardrails that security and operations teams can actually apply. Without this translation, appetite statements risk becoming abstract slogans that no one knows how to enforce. For example, if executives declare we accept minimal cyber risk, the translation might specify patch service level agreements, encryption requirements, or access control standards. This alignment bridges the gap between high-level ambition and frontline execution, ensuring appetite influences real decisions. It is also important to recognize that risk appetite is not uniform across all domains of a business. An organization may adopt different appetites for financial, operational, reputational, and cybersecurity risks. For example, a technology startup might tolerate higher financial risk as it seeks rapid growth, but hold a very low appetite for reputational damage from a data breach. A hospital might accept operational risks and equipment upgrades but have zero appetite for clinical risks that jeopardize patient safety. By tailoring appetite across domains, organizations reflect the realities of their unique environments rather than relying on one-size-fits-all declarations. Communicating appetite effectively is often the hardest part. Abstract language can leave business units confused about what the organization truly accepts or rejects. To avoid this, appetite statements should be written in plain language with clear examples. For instance, we are willing to accept residual cyber risk on non-critical services but require stringent protection of patient health records. This kind of statement allows employees across departments to understand the boundaries. Simple language makes appetite actionable rather than aspirational, ensuring that staff decisions, from IT configurations to vendor selections, align with leadership's intent. Translating appetite into metrics is what makes it operational. These metrics could be monetary ceilings on acceptable losses, maximum patch timelines expressed as service-level agreements, or minimum availability requirements for critical systems. For example, appetite might be defined as, we accept up to $50,000 in annual cyber losses but no more. This can then be broken down into thresholds like, critical patches must be applied within 14 days, and systems supporting payroll must achieve 99.9% uptime. Metrics remove ambiguity and create measurable targets that teams can monitor, helping appetite flow directly into real-world safeguards. Tolerance bands provide further refinement by allowing controlled deviations with predefined responses. Instead of treating every small breach as a crisis, tolerance bands establish ranges where deviations are allowed temporarily while still keeping risk under watch. For example, a patching SLA might allow 95% compliance as green, 90 to 95% as amber requiring review, and below 90% as red requiring escalation. This structured flexibility prevents teams from overreacting to minor fluctuations but ensures serious problems trigger action. By building tolerance bands, organizations achieve balance between rigid enforcement and practical adaptability in daily operations. Threshold design is critical for clarity and effectiveness. A well-designed threshold must be measurable, testable, and time-bound. Ambiguous thresholds like systems must be secure are unhelpful because no one knows how to measure compliance. Instead, a threshold might state, all critical systems must apply vendor patches within 14 days of release. This requirement is measurable, can be tested by checking system logs, and is time-bound with a clear deadline. Effective thresholds eliminate confusion and make it possible for teams to know exactly when action is required, supporting consistent enforcement and accountability. Escalation playbooks tie directly to threshold crossings, providing step-by-step instructions for who acts, when, and how. Without playbooks, thresholds may trigger confusion instead of action. For example, if patch compliance drops below 90%, the playbook might specify that the Security Operations Center notifies the patching team immediately. Leadership receives a daily status update, and remediation must be completed within 5 days. Escalation playbooks remove uncertainty in high-pressure situations, ensuring that breaches of appetite or tolerance trigger swift, coordinated responses instead of finger-pointing or delay. Risk appetite and tolerance should not be static. They must be revisited after major organizational changes such as mergers, acquisitions, or strategic pivots. A company that once tolerated high financial risk and expansion may adopt a lower appetite after stabilizing its market share. Similarly, a shift to remote work may change appetite for operational or cybersecurity risks. Regular reviews ensure appetite statements remain aligned with the current reality of the business rather than outdated conditions. Review cadence also signals to stakeholders that leadership takes risk governance seriously and adapts as circumstances evolve. A practical starter exercise brings the concepts to life. Consider drafting a cyber risk appetite statement such as, we accept low residual risk for non-critical services, but require that critical systems maintain less than 1% of unpatched hosts at any time. To enforce this, define 2 operational thresholds. First, critical patches must be applied within 14 days of vendor release, and second, if more than 1% of critical systems remain unpatched after 14 days, escalate to the CIO within 24 hours. This exercise shows how appetite statements cascade into thresholds and actions. By practicing with examples, learners begin to see that appetite, tolerance, and thresholds are not abstract governance terms, but practical mechanisms for decision-making. Appetite sets the vision, tolerance provides controlled flexibility, and thresholds translate both into operational triggers. Together, they ensure that organizations do not drift into unmanaged risk, but instead take risks deliberately and within agreed boundaries. These concepts empower leaders to take bold actions while ensuring guardrails keep the organization safe. With this foundation, Part 2 will dive deeper into cascading thresholds, exception processes, and embedding these rules into monitoring and governance systems. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Cascading thresholds show how a small breach in one area can trigger larger governance escalations. Imagine a patching metric falling below its tolerance band. At the operations level, this might generate an automated alert for the patch team. If the issue persists past a set time frame, it escalates to the IT director. Should the problem extend further, it might reach the executive committee. This cascade ensures that unresolved risks climb the chain of accountability until they are addressed. Cascading thresholds keep minor issues from being ignored and guarantee that persistent deviations eventually receive attention at the highest levels. Thresholds can be either quantitative or qualitative, depending on the nature of the risk. Quantitative thresholds rely on hard numbers, such as a maximum percentage of unpatched systems or a minimum uptime percentage. Quantitative thresholds use descriptive conditions, such as no tolerance for insider fraud or zero tolerance for regulatory violations. While numbers are often easier to measure, qualitative thresholds can capture risks that are difficult to quantify but still critical. For example, an organization might establish a qualitative threshold declaring that any loss of customer trust requires executive intervention, even if financial losses are unclear. Organizations must also have processes for handling exceptions when thresholds are intentionally breached. Sometimes it may be impossible or impractical to remain within tolerance temporarily, such as when a vendor delays releasing a patch. In these cases, documented exception requests allow the risk to be accepted for a defined period, often with compensating controls in place. For example, if patching is delayed, additional monitoring may be added until the fix is available. Documenting exceptions ensures transparency and prevents silent violations of appetite. It also allows leadership to understand and approve temporary deviations rather than being caught unaware later. Linking thresholds to KRIs creates a system where signals are automatically measured and trended. For instance, a KRI monitoring failed login attempts can directly support a threshold that states no more than 100 failed logins per hour on critical systems. When KRIs and thresholds are connected, breaches become self-detecting. This reduces reliance on manual monitoring and ensures timely response. Automated linkage also provides historical data, showing whether breaches are isolated incidents or part of an emerging trend. By tying KRIs and thresholds together, organizations create a more reliable, continuous way to monitor alignment with appetite. For operational teams, thresholds must be communicated clearly and embedded into runbooks. A runbook is a step-by-step guide that outlines how teams should respond to routine and emergency scenarios. Including thresholds in runbooks means that when a metric crosses a line, teams know exactly what to do without hesitation. For example, a runbook may state, if patch compliance drops below 90%, notify the SOC, open a ticket with the patch team, and escalate to the IT director if not resolved within 72 hours. Embedding thresholds into runbooks speeds response and avoids confusion. Monitoring and alerting around thresholds must also include clear ownership and service level agreements, SLAs. If an alert is generated, someone must be explicitly responsible for acknowledging it and initiating action. SLAs define how quickly these responses should occur. For example, requiring that critical alerts be acknowledged within 1 hour and resolved within 24. Without owners and SLAs, alerts may pile up without resolution, undermining the purpose of thresholds. Clear ownership ensures accountability, while SLAs set expectations for timeliness, helping organizations maintain discipline in their risk management process. Stress testing thresholds is another valuable practice to ensure they trigger useful actions. Scenario analysis allows teams to simulate conditions, such as a sudden surge in phishing emails or a prolonged system outage, to see whether thresholds detect the issue appropriately and whether playbooks produce effective responses. If thresholds fail to trigger during simulations, they may need to be recalibrated. Likewise, if they trigger too often on benign conditions, they risk causing alert fatigue. Stress testing confirms that thresholds strike the right balance, producing alerts when necessary but not overwhelming staff with noise. Thresholds must evolve as risk conditions change, which means updating them based on historical incident data and the organization's evolving risk posture. For instance, if past incidents reveal that attackers frequently exploit vulnerabilities within 7 days of release, a 14-day patch threshold may no longer be acceptable. Similarly, if operational improvements reduce average patching time, thresholds can be tightened to reflect the new norm. Updating thresholds based on data keeps them relevant, aligning them with both external threat landscapes and internal capabilities. Static thresholds risk becoming obsolete and ineffective over time. Governance approval levels establish who has the authority to change appetite, tolerance, and thresholds. Appetite statements typically require board or executive approval, while tolerance bands and operational thresholds may be adjusted by risk committees or department heads. Documenting these approval processes prevents unauthorized changes and ensures accountability. For example, a CIO may have authority to adjust patch compliance thresholds, but only the board can revise the organization's stated appetite for cyber risk. Governance processes formalize how adjustments are made, ensuring that risk boundaries remain aligned with leadership intent. Visualization is a powerful way to make appetite and thresholds real for decision-makers. Dashboards can display current metrics against appetite and tolerance levels, highlighting breaches in red for immediate attention. For example, a board dashboard might show the percentage of critical systems patched on time, with thresholds clearly marked. Visualization makes it easy for leaders to see when boundaries are crossed without wading through technical detail. This transparency promotes accountability and allows leaders to quickly grasp whether the organization is operating within its declared appetite or drifting into unacceptable risk. Educating stakeholders is equally important. Appetite and thresholds may be meaningless to business units unless they are explained in practical terms. Workshops help staff interpret what statements like low appetite for cyber risk mean in their daily decisions. For example, a finance team might learn that this appetite requires them to enforce stricter vendor controls, while IT learns it means tighter timelines for patching. Education ensures thresholds are not just numbers on a dashboard, but operational expectations that everyone understands and supports. This shared understanding strengthens consistency across departments. In the end, appetite, tolerance, and thresholds only provide value if they are clear, measurable, and operationalized. Appetite statements define the philosophy, tolerance bands provide flexibility, and thresholds trigger action. The cycle is completed when organizations write the appetite in plain language, select key indicators to measure it, and establish formal escalation steps for breaches. This ensures that risk management is not just a leadership-level concept, but a day-to-day operational practice. When appetite and thresholds are embedded across the organization, they guide decisions consistently, balancing ambition with responsibility in a measurable way. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.